Hollywood has a history of celebrating pioneers, directors and storytellers hailed as visionaries who changed the game. But sometimes, the people who truly crack the door open get erased from the story. While Jordan Peele, Ryan Coogler, and Issa Rae are praised today for reshaping cinema, decades earlier, one man had already done it. His name was Robert Townsend. He was the director who exposed Hollywood's dirty secrets long before the industry was ready to face them. And instead of being rewarded, he was punished. This is a story Hollywood never wanted you to hear. A story about a brilliant filmmaker who refused to play the game, who spoke truth to power at the peak of his career, and who paid the price in silence, financial struggle, and decades of erasure. From humiliating auditions where he was told to act more urban, to secretly funding a movie with his credit cards just to expose the industry, to directing one of the most successful comedy films ever made and still being shut out, Robert Townsend's career reveals how Hollywood operates when someone refuses to stay in their assigned box. And yet, despite every attempt to silence him, he endured. His films, once buried, are being rediscovered. His influence, once ignored, is finally being acknowledged. At 68 years old, Townsend has confirmed what many long suspected, that he was blacklisted, marginalized, and deliberately erased. But the truth has a way of resurfacing, and Robert Townsend's truth is more powerful now than ever. In the early 1980s, Robert Townsend thought his big break had finally come. After years of grinding, studying Shakespeare, perfecting his craft at Chicago's legendary Second City, and mastering method acting in New York, he landed a role in A Soldier's Story, a powerful drama alongside Denzel Washington. The film was nominated for 3 Academy Awards. For the first time, Townsend felt like Hollywood was starting to notice him, but reality came crashing down in the most brutal way possible. When he walked into auditions, casting directors weren't interested in his Shakespeare training or his ability to deliver complex emotional performances. They weren't looking for nuance, intelligence, or humanity. Instead, they looked at his skin color and reduced him to a stereotype. One casting director, clipboard in hand, tone as casual as ordering lunch, said, "You're here for the 8-ball role." Townsend glanced at the character description. Street-smart pimp with gold teeth, talks jive, intimidating but ultimately harmless comic relief. His stomach sank. This was what they saw when they looked at him. Not the Hamlet soliloquy he could recite flawlessly. Not the years of comedic improvisation that brought audiences to their feet. Just a caricature. And it wasn't just one audition. Week after week, Townsend was called in for roles with names like Midnight, Razor, or Licorice. The characters were almost always the same. Gang members, slaves, or sidekicks whose only purpose was to make white leads look better. He loved acting with all his heart, but slowly, painfully, he began to realize the truth. Hollywood wasn't broken. It was working exactly the way it was designed to. Townsend could have walked away. He could have played the game, accepted the stereotypes, and built a safe career as the comic relief Hollywood wanted him to be. But instead, he turned his pain into satire. Late at night, after humiliating auditions, he started writing down everything he'd seen. The ridiculous character names, the notes to Be More Street, the way directors expected black actors to shuffle, grin, and degrade themselves for a cheap laugh. At first, it was just therapy, but soon, it became comedy gold. He worked these stories into his stand-up routine, sharpening the jokes until they cut like a knife. That's when his close friend Keenan Ivory Wayans saw the potential. Together, they came up with an idea that would take those painful experiences and blow them up into sketches. They called it Black Acting School, a fictional academy where black actors were trained to humiliate themselves for white audiences. The sketch was funny, yes, but it was also brutally real. Audiences laughed because they recognized the absurdity. Actors laughed because they had lived it. And for Townsend, something clicked. Satire wasn't just a way to cope. It was a weapon. But Townsend wasn't interested in stopping at a comedy routine. He wanted to make something bigger, something that couldn't be ignored. With Keenan Ivory Wayans by his side, he began planning a feature film that would hold up a mirror to Hollywood and expose the racism built into its very foundation. They would call it Hollywood Shuffle. But telling this truth would come with a price Townsend had no idea he was about to pay. Making Hollywood Shuffle should have been impossible. No studio wanted to fund a movie that criticized the very system they profited from. So Townsend did the unthinkable. He financed it himself. Every commercial he booked, every small role he landed, every dollar he could scrape together went into the film. When the money ran out, he pulled out his credit cards. By the end, he had maxed out over a dozen cards, risking everything he had for one shot at telling the truth. And in 1987, it paid off. Hollywood Shuffle premiered to stunned audiences. audiences. This wasn't subtle commentary. It was a direct attack on Hollywood's racist infrastructure. The black acting school sequence became instantly iconic. Watching actors being taught to shuffle, jive talk, and play stereotypes felt absurd and hilarious, but also horrifyingly real. Critics praised Townsend as a bold new voice. Roger Ebert called it a logistical triumph. Gene Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs up. The New York Times and Washington Post hailed it as fearless and urgent. For the first time, black audiences saw their own frustrations reflected on screen, while white audiences were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. But something strange happened. Instead of opening doors, the movie quietly closed them. Townsend noticed meetings drying up, projects slipping away, opportunities disappearing. Hollywood tolerated his success, but they weren't about to fund another rebellion. Townsend had just exposed the system. Now, that same system was preparing to make him pay for it. For most filmmakers, a critically acclaimed debut meant a studio deal. The pattern was almost predictable. A breakout indie success, followed by Hollywood swooping in with money, resources, and a contract for the next big project. But for Robert Townsend, that never came. While his peers were being courted with multi-picture offers, Townsend was left to fight for scraps. He did land one major project, directing Eddie Murphy, Raw, in 1987. At the time, Eddie Murphy was the biggest star on the planet, commanding massive box office numbers and dominating comedy. Directing Murphy's stand-up special should have been a career-making opportunity, and in many ways, it was. Raw didn't just succeed, it shattered records, becoming the highest-grossing stand-up comedy film of all time. Townsend's direction was sharp, confident, and flawless. He staged it with cinematic energy, making what could have been a static stage show feel alive and dynamic on screen. By all accounts, this should have catapulted him into the A-list, but instead of opening doors, it reinforced Hollywood's trap. Studios were more than willing to use his skills when they benefited someone else's project, especially a star as bankable as Eddie Murphy, but they weren't willing to give him the same trust for his own vision. They would acknowledge his talent as a craftsman, but deny him the resources to develop his own stories. The contrast was glaring. Other directors who scored big with early projects often landed studio-backed features immediately afterward. Townsend, despite proving himself twice, first with Hollywood Shuffle, then with Raw, was told to wait, sidelined while Hollywood reaped the benefits of his labor without rewarding him. The message was clear. Robert Townsend was good enough to succeed, but not trusted enough to lead. After Hollywood Shuffle and Raw, Townsend's next big project was The 5 Heartbeats. Inspired by Motown groups like The Temptations and The Dells, it was a film about the beauty and struggles of black musical culture. Townsend traveled with the Dells, absorbing their stories of exploitation, racism, and survival. He wanted to make something authentic, raw, and true. But Hollywood didn't want authenticity. Studios wanted him to strip out the racism, remove the church sequences, and turn it into a watered-down, feel-good musical. Townsend refused. He'd already proven that audiences craved honest black stories. He wasn't about to compromise. Took years of battling studios before 20th Century Fox finally agreed to finance it, with a reduced budget and limited marketing. When The 5 Heartbeats premiered in 1991, it was a revelation. The performances were electric, the music soared, and the story captured the triumph and heartbreak of black artists in a way Hollywood had never dared to show. Audiences, especially black audiences, embraced it with passion. For many, it was the first time they saw their family histories reflected on screen. But once again, the studio sabotaged its reach. With little marketing and limited release, it never reached the mainstream spotlight. Critics were divided, some dismissing it as sentimental. And just like that, another masterpiece was buried. By the mid-1990s, Robert Townsend had already accomplished what most filmmakers only dream of. He'd directed 2 groundbreaking classics, exposed Hollywood's racist practices with sharp satire, and helmed the highest-grossing stand-up film in history. By all logic, he should have been a household name, studied in film schools and showered with opportunities. But that didn't happen. Instead, something quieter and more insidious took place. Erasure. Townsend's name began to fade from conversations. When journalists wrote about the rise of black cinema in the 80s and 90s, they celebrated Spike Lee, John Singleton, and later, the Hughes brothers. And while those filmmakers absolutely deserved recognition, Townsend's contributions were curiously absent from the narrative. Hollywood Shuffle, a film that kicked the door wide open, was treated as a footnote, if it was mentioned at all. Even his successes were minimized. His sitcom The Parenthood ran for 5 seasons on the WB, reaching millions of viewers and providing one of the rare depictions of a loving, middle-class black family on television. television. It inspired a wave of similar shows and gave work to dozens of young actors and writers. Yet, when television retrospectives celebrated the golden age of black sitcoms, Townsend's name was often skipped. Shows like Family Matters and the IIT Fresh Prince of Bel-Air were remembered, while The Parenthood was quietly ignored. The 2000s made the situation worse. As new voices emerged, Hollywood and the media reframed the story of black filmmaking. Independent cinema was celebrated, but Townsend's influence was rarely acknowledged. His work wasn't just forgotten, it was deliberately downplayed. Industry insiders whispered that he was difficult or too political, code words often used to blacklist talent. By controlling the narrative, Hollywood was able to push him to the margins while still praising diversity in the abstract. Then came the streaming era. Services like Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon claimed to be revolutionizing access to film history, but Townsend's movies weren't prioritized. Algorithms buried them, making it nearly impossible for younger audiences to stumble upon his work. As a result, a whole generation grew up discovering Get Out and Black Panther without ever knowing that Townsend's Meteor Man, released in 1993, was the first black superhero film from a major studio. Years before Marvel embraced diversity, Townsend had already done it, only to have his achievement erased from cultural memory. Hollywood had pulled off the perfect trick. They didn't need to openly ban him or publicly attack him. All they had to do was ignore him. And in an industry where attention is everything, silence can be more powerful than outright rejection. By sidelining Townsend, by leaving his name out of history books, they made it seem like he had never been there at all. But the truth was different. He had been there. He had always been there. Hollywood just didn't want you to remember. The Bill Cosby scandal exposed yet another impossible position for Robert Townsend. Cosby had been one of the few powerful figures in Hollywood to support him during his rise. Townsend had directed episodes connected to Cosby's projects and had seen firsthand how Cosby's influence opened doors that might have otherwise stayed shut. To Townsend, Cosby wasn't just another celebrity. He was someone who had given him opportunities when the system tried to deny them. So when allegations against Cosby surfaced, Townsend was caught in a no-win situation. If he came out strongly against Cosby, he risked looking like he was turning on someone who had once championed him. If he stayed silent, people accused him of protecting a nasty man. And if he tried to strike a middle ground, acknowledging the seriousness of the allegations without fully condemning Cosby, he ended up satisfying no one. Critics pounced, suggesting Townsend was being evasive or weak. Journalists questioned his integrity. Fans who had once praised him accused him of not standing up for victims. And within the industry, his careful, cautious words were seen as proof that he was still trying to navigate Hollywood's dangerous politics. It revealed just how fragile his career still was. Even after decades of groundbreaking work, Townsend was still treated as though he had no margin for error. Other filmmakers could speak freely, voice strong opinions, or distance themselves boldly from controversy. Townsend, on the other hand, had to measure every word, knowing that one wrong sentence could be the excuse Hollywood needed to close the door on him forever. The Cosby controversy wasn't really about Cosby at all. It was about how Townsend had been boxed in by a system that never allowed him the freedom to speak without consequence. It was a reminder that Hollywood had never truly forgiven him for Hollywood Shuffle, and even years later, he was still walking on a razor's edge. But the story doesn't end there. In 2018, something remarkable happened. A new generation stumbled onto Robert Townsend's work and saw it with fresh eyes. Clips from the 5 Heartbeats went viral, circulating on Twitter and Instagram with captions like, "How have I never seen this before?" Film students began sharing scenes from Hollywood Shuffle, shocked that a film from the 1980s was still so relevant to the conversations about representation happening today. What Townsend had been ridiculed for decades earlier now looked visionary. Then came the ultimate validation. The Criterion Collection announced a 4K restoration of Hollywood Shuffle. For filmmakers and critics, Criterion isn't just a brand, it's a statement. To be included means your work is officially recognized as essential cinema. After decades of erasure, Townsend's satire was suddenly being treated with the reverence it always deserved. Critics who had once dismissed him started reassessing his influence. Younger directors like Jordan Peele, Ryan Coogler, and Issa Rae began acknowledging Townsend in interviews, crediting him for opening doors they were now walking through. Film schools began placing Hollywood Shuffle on syllabi next to Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It, teaching it as a foundational text in black cinema. And Townsend didn't simply bask in this late recognition. Even at 68, he never stopped creating. He directed new projects, taught at USC, and continued mentoring rising filmmakers through his foundation. His documentary, Making studying the 5 heartbeats, pulled back the curtain on his struggles, ensuring future artists could learn from his battles. The system had tried to erase him, but it failed. Townsend's legacy lived on not just in his films, but in every young filmmaker bold enough to tell their story without waiting for permission. His persistence proved that while Hollywood could delay recognition, it could never destroy truth. Robert Townsend's greatest victory wasn't a single movie, or a single award, or even a single moment of recognition. His true victory was survival. Survival against a system that tried every possible trick to push him into the shadows. Think about it. Hollywood gave him humiliating auditions. They told him he wasn't allowed to play complex roles. They forced him into boxes that were designed to make him disappear. And when he refused to play along, when he fought back with satire, they didn't just criticize him, they erased him. They used his talent for their projects, but starved him when he tried to tell his own stories. They buried his masterpieces with poor marketing and limited distribution. They rewrote history books to make it seem like he wasn't even there. Most people would have given up. Most people would have broken under the weight of it all. But Townsend didn't. He kept working. He kept creating. He kept fighting for a space that Hollywood never wanted to give him. And now, decades later, that persistence has paid off. His films are being rediscovered. His influence is being recognized. His name is finally being restored to its rightful place in the story of American cinema. And here's the part that matters most. Townsend didn't just make films. He made freedom possible. Every time a young black filmmaker decides to tell their story their own way, without compromise, that's Townsend's legacy in action. Every time Hollywood tries to stereotype and someone pushes back, that's Townsend's spirit living on. His impact is not locked in the past. It's alive right now, shaping the present and the future. Hollywood tried to silence him. They tried to erase him. They tried to make him disappear, and they failed. Today, when you see filmmakers like Jordan Peele, Ava DuVernay, or Ryan Coogler bringing their visions to life, you're seeing seeds that Robert Townsend planted decades ago with nothing but determination, maxed out credit cards, and an unshakable belief that black stories mattered. That's why Townsend's story matters so much. It's not just history, it's a warning and an inspiration. A warning that Hollywood can and will erase those who challenge it, but also an inspiration, showing that truth, talent, and persistence can outlast even the most systematic erasure. Robert Townsend isn't just a forgotten filmmaker rediscovered. He's proof that no matter how powerful the system may seem, it cannot erase integrity, it cannot erase art, and it cannot erase truth. So the next time you hear people talk about pioneers in black cinema, remember this: the real trailblazers aren't always the ones Hollywood celebrates. Sometimes they're the ones Hollywood tried hardest to bury. And Robert Townsend is living proof that the truth will always resurface.